Ladies and gentlemen, it is I, a random male species who has spent countless years perfecting the art of aim with some of the most highest headshot percentages in all game modes. I have come here with some hard-to-find knowledge that may just change your perspective on aiming. And while I drop this knowledge, you can sit back and watch some raw aiming of mine in a TDM. And before anyone starts hating on the fact that it's a TDM, just know that the same thing happens in comp. It's just my PC sucks, and because of that, I can't really record any clips on there. Anyways, you've probably heard it all. The range, aim training, and death matches. In fact, I've even said in previous videos that spamming these and doing them in high quality reps will definitely improve your aim. And while this is very true, you have to understand something, right? And that something is that there are different levels to aim. Just as an example, as you progress the ranks, you go from wanting to have good aim, to wanting to tap heads, to wanting to tap heads fast, to wanting to have very high first bullet accuracy, to wanting to have very high first bullet accuracy, but also accurately tracking the opponent mid-gunfight just in case the bullet accuracy doesn't land, and the list goes on. There's so many different ways to aim, and there's so many levels to aiming. In today's video, I want to talk about something that very highly influences this, but no one really talks about. Because you see, how can someone truly achieve any of this? You'll always hear pro players and high-ranked individuals talk about sensitivity does not matter because it's all preference, and that setup doesn't matter because it's all preference. But what if I told you this is only true to a certain limit, and once you reach that limit, you'll realize how much better you can get and how much of a higher level you can play at just by simply finding a better mousepad, or even just a better sensitivity, or even just the right chair adjustment, or the table height adjustment. And yes, all of those things that I just listed can drastically improve your aim and skill at a game without you even realizing it. You see, when I first started out in this game, I used to play on like 2.4 sensitivity with 800 DPI, one of the fastest sensitivities out there. But at the time, to me, being a completely new player, I thought to myself that I'll master this high sense and focus only on tapping the head. And that's exactly what I did. I only focused on tapping heads and eventually got extremely good with super high sensitivity. But it was only after months and months of ranking up that I hit some sort of barrier. I realized, despite having super high sense and super good aim, there was another level to aiming that I couldn't figure out, since I was basically just getting put down immediately once I hit that barrier. Then, after lowering my sensitivity, I was able to rank up yet again, and this kept happening. I would grind, then eventually meet another wall, and then lower my sensitivity and rank up again. It suddenly occurred to me that this game was a bit different than I first thought. You see, originally, I had thought that if you had the faster sensitivity, then you would inevitably react much faster. And if you mastered the faster sensitivity, then surely you would perform at a higher level, right? Well, there is some truth to that, but there's also some flaws there. But instead of going into an hour breakdown of why and what and where, I'll just put it like this. When it comes to this game, mouse control is much more important than any other aspect of aiming. Yes, you heard that right. Mouse control. You see, the more consistent mouse control you possess, the more consistent aim you will have. So now you have to think about it. Well, what is mouse control and how can I make it consistent, right? So aside from the obvious factors like training your aim, mouse control is essentially your ability to control the mouse in all areas and aspects of aiming within the game. So whether someone's in the sky, whether someone's on low ground, and aiming very precisely as well. These are all things that come into mouse control. A lot of people, when they initially start out at a game, right, they initially think that everything's muscle memory, but this is just not true. Muscle memory is actually there, and it is present to a degree. I would refer to muscle memory more as your mind's ability to remember the sensitivity that you're playing at, if that makes sense. And then sometimes your mind's ability to remember how much you need to move your mouse to do a flick or something like that, or a micro adjustment, right? Things like that. But again, that's muscle memory to a degree, yes, but it's all dependent on your mouse control. Some really good tips, right, to get really good mouse control is get a super light mouse and use a super low sense. This allows for much better mouse control. Or if you are truly a higher sensitivity individual, then get a heavier mouse instead and a high sense, and vice versa. This law essentially is bound to give you much better aim than you probably realize, but it doesn't end there. As someone who's actually tested quite literally every sensitivity, like on the highest end of the spectrum all the way to the lowest end, extensively with months and months on different sensitivities, I can say throughout my testing, I've noticed something. If you are someone who wants to play on a higher sensitivity, I'd recommend you go for the higher end of the spectrum of higher sensitivities and master that. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, instead of playing on 1600 DPI with 0.280 sensitivity, for example, which would be considered high sensitivity for most, I would say play at 2.0 sensitivity at 800 DPI. Obviously, this is a huge change and drastically much faster, but let me explain the issue here. When you play on a high sensitivity, you have trained your wrist to move for all of your interactions in the game, basically. But when you play on a quote-unquote high sensitivity, where it's still kind of bordering low sensitivity, then you have this weird dilemma between using your wrist to aim or your arm to aim, since it makes sense that you could use both in any scenario with a sensitivity like 0.280 at 1600. Now keep in mind, there are very many factors to this, like your desk positioning even, that really depend on what's going to be used more, your arm or your wrist. That's why I said even those things matter, guys. But this is just something that I personally encountered, and I'm sure most people on a sensitivity in that range may encounter. Again, everything's subjective, right? But my conclusion is simple. If you are a high sensitivity player, play on the highest sensitivity possible that you can control well and feels the most natural to you. If you are better at a lower sensitivity, or even if you perform better at a low/high sensitivity, like 0.2 range at 1600 for example, then I would recommend you test out super low sensitivity to see if that fits. And believe it or not, your mousepad also plays a huge role. The thing is, a lot of this stuff is honestly trial and error, and despite all the people that will try and convince you that these things do not matter, they actually do. And you'll realize they do once you make that switch after you hit your first wall. I mean, heck, like I've said before, even your desk height or chair height play a drastic role in how much control you have over your mouse. Arguably, more impactful than everything else on the list, and I'm not even joking about that. Just try it out. Everything is trial and error. So now with all of this understanding, before you are quick to blame yourself for missing an aim training session, think about what investments you are financially able to make. And if investing in different mouse pads or investing some time into different sensitivities is an option, I'd highly recommend you try that out, because the change you will find may just blow your mind.